Why get married? People want a partner. Half the dialogue that you hear between people, especially if they're single, is related to their desire to have a partner. And of course, half the dialogue you hear from people who are in a relationship is how to deal with problems in their relationship. But it's a very rare person who doesn't need and want an intimate relationship. And then you have to ask yourself, what does intimate mean? And the cheap interpretation of intimate is sexual, but that's a pale reflection in some sense of true intimacy, even on the sexual front, because true intimacy means getting to know someone. It's interesting that the biblical term for sexual congress is knowledge. And I think that's because the intimacy that brings about the highest level of sexual fulfillment, all things considered, has to be nested within a much more profound and properly integrated and oriented intimacy. And I think that most fundamentally that's to be found in the state of marriage. People often think about marriage as the death of sex, let's say, but permanent singlehood is also, by the way, the death of sex. And one of the things that we've seen as the sexual revolution has continued apace is that young people are, in some sense, more disturbed in their sexual orientation rather than less, turning to pornography and masturbation, and forswearing intimate relationships entirely, or forswearing sexual interaction of all sorts, even self-administered entirely. And that doesn't seem to be a plus. So you enter into marriage as an act of faith. You fall in love with someone, which is a grace, a gift of God in some real sense. You see what it would be like to care for someone. You see what it would be like to have someone care for you and value you. You get a glimpse of that in love. And then you have a challenge set before you, which is, can you arrange your life with this person that you've fallen in love with so that state of love permeates the entire relationship and everything you do together all the time? And so that would make a marriage the perfect date that repeats endlessly. Now, obviously, that's an extraordinarily high goal to hit, a high mountain to climb, but you need something to do, and it might as well be that. And in an intimate relationship, when things are going as well as they can go, I think you're hard-pressed to find anything better in life. So why not attempt to achieve that? Why do you need marriage? You need marriage just like you need other social institutions. Marriage is a great burden and responsibility, as well as a great opportunity. It's a burden and responsibility because as a married couple, you're going to face together everything that life can throw at you. And so the difference between a casual affair, let's say, and a marriage is that the casual affair is all milk and honey, let's say. It's all pleasure, although it very rarely works out that way, but that's the theory. Whereas in the marriage, you have to contend with the harsh realities of all the dimensions of life. But you want to take that on voluntarily, and you want to share that with someone. And if you do that properly within the confines of a marriage, then you have someone to weave together the rope of the narrative of your life. And you have someone to bounce yourself off, and you have someone to improve yourself in relationship with, and you have someone that you have to take into consideration, like you should take yourself into consideration, and you have someone that you have to take into consideration over the longest possible span of time. And what that means is that you're forced, in a real sense, to perform the kind of sacrifice of impulsive hedonism that produces a true maturity. So let's say, imagine that you're only out for yourself, and maybe you are willing to use other people instrumentally sexually, and your motivation is hedonism and pleasure come what may. So, okay, let's think about that. What do you mean by pleasure? Do you mean pleasure in the next 30 seconds? Do you mean pleasure in the next 3 minutes? Do you mean pleasure tonight? And I'm asking because you might say, why not cocaine and hookers as a non-stop diet? And the answer to that seems to be something like, it might be good for 3 minutes or one evening, but the hangover the next day isn't to be desired, and that gets worse the more you walk down that hedonic route. And then there's the call of conscience that comes a knocking at 3 a.m. when you're hungover and dissolute after your idiot promiscuous rampage. It's a bad medium to long-term strategy. So when we're talking about hedonism, we have to specify exactly what we mean. Are you doing what makes you happy in an impulsive way? Or are you doing what's best for you in the multiplicity of your iterations across the broadest span of decades? And then we would say, if you're acting properly in relationship to you and all of your future selves, then you're sacrificing the idiot impulsive hedonism of the present to a medium to long-term strategy that's preferable in all regards. And I would say that's part of developing an adult vision. And then you might say, I want to be free to pursue my hedonic demands, desires, whenever I want to, under what conditions, whatever conditions prevail. And I would first say, do you really think that's possible? Like, how is that going to work? Second, aren't you just going to use other people for your own pleasure? Third, aren't you just going to use yourself for your own short-term and counterproductive pleasure? Fourth, how is that different from being a 2-year-old? There's nothing in that's a mature vision. And so you could imagine, and this is a technical argument, that the nature of moral behavior is constrained by the fact of your repetition across the hours and days and weeks and months and years. You have to act in relationship to yourself like you're a totality stretched across time. And so that means that, and this is why conscience bothers you if you betray yourself, is because your conscience is an indicator of behavior in relationship to the medium and the long run. Now, that means you have to treat yourself like you're a community that extends across time. And one way of learning how to do that's very profound is to shackle yourself to another person, say within the confines of a marriage, because then you know that you're going to be with that person for the minutes and hours and days and weeks and years of your life. And so you have to treat them in a manner that's reciprocal and productive, that grows positively over decades.